Hi all, thank you so much for joining. We're going to give it a few minutes to let more folks join, and then we will go ahead and get started. Thanks again for joining. We'll get started in just about another minute or two.
Greetings, everyone. This is Jason Meyer with our Electricity Innovation Lab team based in Boulder. I hope you're warm where you're at. It's cold and snowy here. Just to repeat the webinar logistics, and then we'll get going. The first one is all participants on mute. So please submit any questions that you might have over the course of this webinar via the questions window in your control panel. And then after the webinar, we'll send out a link to the full recording within 24 hours, and also make this generally more public on the web. During the course of this webinar, if you experience any technical difficulties, feel free to send us an email, Christine Chan Lizardo, kcl.contractor@rmi.org, or chat in the webinar interface, and we'll also get it there. So with that, I'd like to just again provide a really warm welcome from the Rocky Mountain Institute and our eLab Accelerator team. Many of you are familiar with RMI in a variety of different capacities. We conduct research, analysis, we provide expertise. The Electricity Innovation Lab and our team is really focused on another role, which is convening and facilitation, and we'll get into a little bit more of that and how that shows up at eLab Accelerator. The core team you see on the screen, Karina Chan, principal of eLab, myself, Jason Meyer. I manage our eLab ecosystem and all our different convenings and events. Sherry Villamoria, she is the project manager for Accelerator this year, so you may have seen already some communications from Sherry on applications, this webinar, etc. And she is assisted by Kara Goldmichael, who is also in our New York office. I'd like to just review a couple of the objectives for the webinar today. First, we're going to provide just a couple words on eLab and eLab Accelerator more broadly. And then we are going to describe the specifics of eLab Accelerator 2019, which is hopefully why you're joining us today. What are the projects that we're seeking for application? What makes very strong candidates? What Accelerator provides these projects? We're going to show a couple of examples from previous years and also provide a couple more details on the application process itself. And then finally, as time allows, we hope to answer any questions that you might have on the event and the application process. Great. I'd like to just share a couple words on eLab. So the Electricity Innovation Lab, or eLab, is an initiative within our electricity practice here at RMI. eLab brings thought leaders, decision makers, together to address the most critical challenges requiring collective action in the electricity sector today. And we primarily do this through multi-stakeholder convenings, boot camps, on-the-ground engagements, even practitioner trainings. Our expertise, if you will, at eLab is really around collaborative innovation. So the process, the facilitation, etc., needed to convene a diverse set of perspectives to work together in new ways for new and different outcomes. So there's a couple things that eLab specifically does. The first one is we seek to solve the most pressing and timely electricity questions that couldn't be solved otherwise. We have a couple hypotheses here. One is that communities, cities, individuals, etc., are experiencing challenges never faced before, and in particular as the electricity system is undergoing transformation. Furthermore, we believe that no one person or organization holds all the information or resources to address these problems. We really need to work together to create new solutions and paths forward. I'd say the second thing that we are really trying to do is empowering individuals who design, regulate, and operate the grid of the future, so everyone on this call. We seek to support individuals and teams as they design and test new solutions. We seek to work with people to develop frameworks for thinking about, making decisions for, navigating the risks and opportunities of the future. And we also seek to build capacity for competitors and counterparties to work together effectively. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Sherry Villamoria. Her and Kara are in New York, and they'll provide us some more details on Accelerator. Welcome again.
Thanks so much, Jason. As he mentioned, this is Sherry Villamoria, and I'm joined by Kara Goldenberg. And we'll be now diving into a little bit more detail about Accelerator and what you might expect there. eLab Accelerator is an invitation-only 4-day working meeting to accelerate high-impact projects from teams that are working on innovative projects at the electricity systems distribution edge. We'll get into the specifics of the types of teams and particular projects that we're looking for in just a bit, but the overall meeting objectives of Accelerator are threefold. The first is to accelerate high-potential projects and support them moving on to the next level, whatever that might mean for that particular project. The second is to share eLab insights and approaches as we've been learning over the last several years of eLab. And the third is to learn from a broad peer group working on related projects. If we can advance great, thank you. So to that end, Accelerator provides several things. The first is a structured working session for teams to make progress on their projects and initiatives in a specific facilitated setting. The second is a rich learning experience featuring experts on the latest thinking around new utility business models and distributed resources across the U.S. We also provide tools and training to conceptualize problems in collaborative and innovative ways. And we hope that teams will form new alliances for a broader support network with other teams who are working on similar projects. And lastly, given that Accelerator is in Sundance and a very particular atmosphere and environment, we hope that Accelerator provides a unique space that is conducive to creativity and breakthrough ideas in a way that isn't possible in your day-to-day work. So a little bit about the methodology of Accelerator. We believe that this type of problem solving is particularly useful for complex problems, and particularly problems that are complex in 3 ways. The first is social complexity, where the stakeholders have different perspectives, different needs, and are coming to the table with potentially also very different experiences. And the way to design for that type of complexity is a very participative and engaged process that includes that entire set of stakeholders who make up the system that you're seeking to change. The second type of complexity is generative complexity. So that's when the future is unfamiliar and undetermined, and you're not sure precisely what the effects of a given change to the system might end up being. And the way to compensate for and solve for this type of complexity is an approach that's creative and an approach that's experimental. So here you really want to be testing new ideas and moving quickly. And the last type of complexity is dynamic complexity. So that's when the cause and effect are far apart in time and space. And here we're really looking for systemic approaches that will include many potential pitfalls and aspects of the system. So Accelerator maximizes the opportunities for meaningful project work and individual learning, not just the project work. And this means several modes of working. The first is the facilitated project team work sessions that are working on the project-specific big questions and big needs. The second is cross-team learning exchange, so when the teams are sharing their progress with one another and getting quick coaching and feedback. And the third is topic training with faculty, so having particular learning sessions around topics and processes that will be useful to the teams with the questions that they have. And the last is the developments of action plans and next steps where those are most useful. A little bit of an example high-level agenda for what you might expect from the 4 days of Accelerator. The first day is really around framing the overall Accelerator approach, why we believe that it's useful, and learning some of the key tools that we think will be helpful in getting this work off the ground. as well as really beginning to dig into the questions and objectives that the teams are bringing to the table. The second day is really around building a shared foundation for these projects that will support forward momentum, as well as identifying the key questions that the project team has and aligning along those questions, as well as beginning to identify the potential leverage points and opportunities. Day 3 is really when you start digging into those leverage points and you begin to identify what are the missing voices and resources that we aren't considering or aren't at the table here. What are our solution hypotheses that we think may be able to move this project forward? What do we need to test? What might the next steps for this project be? As well as in this phase, is particularly when you're getting feedback from the other participants and teams on how to improve your approach and other considerations that you may have initially missed. And the fourth day is really around developing a plan for moving the project forward and making requests and giving offers of support both within your own team and across the different teams, as well as gathering those commitments and next steps to move the project forward once you get back home. A little bit about the Accelerator faculty. Every year we assemble a group of faculty, including diverse experts from across the U.S. electricity system, that provide coaching and help to inform the work of the project teams. Some of these faculty members are eLab alums who we are excellent coaches year to year and tend to come back, and some of them are particularly chosen to be useful to the teams that end up coming to a given year's Accelerator. Expertise tends to include regulatory transformation, portfolio design for renewable resources, venture capital in electricity, pilot design, many other topic areas as well. Previous faculty members have included everyone from John Wellinghoff, who is a former FERC commissioner, Elaine Ulrich, who is with the Sunshot Initiative at the U.S. Department of Energy, Carl Linville from the Regulatory Assistance Project, as well as a number of others who are able to provide their perspective, whether that's regulatory, utility, service provider, or otherwise. I'll pass it now to Kara to speak a little bit to Accelerator projects and project teams.
Great, thank you, Sherry. All right, so as Sherry described, Accelerator is very much focused on the specific projects that teams are bringing forward. And these teams are usually made up of 5 to 7 people representing different perspectives and intentions onto the team. These can be utility employees, these can be regulators, or members of nonprofits, what have you. We typically have 12 teams at Accelerator, so there is a significant amount of other folks to also collaborate with at the event. Projects will have a clear champion or owner. This champion is responsible for some of the main communications between facilitators and the team prior to Accelerator, as well as really forming that team after applications are submitted. The projects that we generally accept for Accelerator are actively under development. And what that means could be they are as simple as in the works, in the sense that a set of team members are having these discussions on potential projects in the future, or they could be as well baked as a specific proposal in front of a regulator. And as I said, we are really looking for diverse, multi-stakeholder teams that bring together folks from all angles and really represent the electricity system that we work in today. And as well as project focus, Accelerator this year is focused on 4 specific themes. I do want to note that in past years, teams have primarily come from North America and have focused on distributed renewable energy. And so, real short, these are the 4 topics that we are looking at for applications this year. New business models for utilities and other solution providers, grid modernization and planning for DERs, electrification of buildings, and DER adoption at scale. So as you can see, these are quite, I would say, broad categories, but we're really aiming to find relevant projects and teams that are progressing on one of these areas, which represent the electricity team's focuses here at RMI. And so every team at Accelerator is designated a facilitator or two in some circumstances. These facilitators are there to help develop the project and the project team. As I said, after projects are selected, that facilitator will work with the champion and other team members to make sure that all voices, needed voices to move this project forward, are in attendance, as well as really help the team to refine their problem statement and objectives for their work at Accelerator. They're there to prepare the project team for Accelerator, so they will be reaching out to each of the team members to see what they would like to get out of their time together and design an agenda fitting to those needs. These facilitators guide the work of the team at Accelerator, so they will be responsible for creating the agenda for the team working sessions, as well as guiding the discussion in order to meet the objectives that were established at the beginning. And then there are these facilitators support the project after Accelerator. There's limited consulting hours that each facilitator has dedicated to their Accelerator team to make sure next steps are proceeding as necessary. And so here gives you a bit of a snapshot of what we look for in applications. These applications should be short and distinct to the point and really tries to describe the impact of why this team should be there at Accelerator specifically. So that includes the project status. So where is the team in project development and implementation? The project statement. What problem is this team facing, and how could this solution move towards addressing that issue? The project impact, so who's going to be impacted and how can this project scale? As well as a diverse stakeholder team. You know, this is diverse in the sense of institutional or organizational background, but also the inclusion of women, minority groups, etc. And then also the team champion. Is there somebody that is driving this project forward and willing to put in the effort needed to make sure that this team walks away with something that they can really use in the future? And I'm going to pass it back to Sherry to describe a few Accelerator past teams.
Great. Thanks so much, Kara. So I'll start with a team championed by Portland General Electric from this past 2018 Accelerator. The Oregon PUC instructed Portland General Electric to develop a demand response test bed. And a team from Oregon came to Accelerator to talk a little bit more about what that would actually be, to prioritize the core objectives of the test bed and to develop approaches that would iterate on the existing as well as the new demand response programs that would allow them to meet their goals as well as to understand what the next steps would be. So to give you an idea of the type of multi-stakeholder team that we are talking about, this team was made up of folks from Portland General Electric, some of the staff from a woman on staff at the Oregon PUC, the Energy Trust of Oregon, Pacific Northwest National Lab, as well as a few other organizations. So a lot of the key players that would be necessary in order to get this off the ground. As well as the two cities who, in addition to Portland, were likely to be the sites for the test bed. You can see a little bit more about it. Great, thanks. So at Accelerator, the team particularly identified the roles of the various stakeholders in this project, who would need to be involved, and particularly what would the value of this project be for each of those stakeholders. They also defined their objectives for this project itself. What did they want to be able to actually be able to say and show through this work, and what would actually be necessary in order to be able to say and do those things? What does success look like? They also developed a draft timeline, including what the different project stages and phases would be, as well as developing the narrative of this project and being able to tell the story of this project in a way that would meet the expectations of the regulators, as well as support discussions with lots of other partners going forward who would be involved in this work. And a little bit about the impact of Accelerator on this team. In October, PG announced their plans to file the proposal for a smart grid testbed that would begin next year. So this is a real project that has legs and is getting off the ground. The work conducted in order to define the project and scope the activity, as I mentioned, resulted in a narrative that was really useful to this team and that they were able to use going forward. And in particular, the project development from Accelerator helped to speed the understanding and support for the project among leadership across different necessary businesses and stakeholders. The next team that I'll mention is not to be confused with PG, but PG&E, so Pacific Gas and Electric, a team from 2017, the Oakland Electric Reliability Project. So at this point in time, PG&E was really interested in developing an innovative DER-based solution to an identified reliability need in a particular location in Oakland. Currently, that reliability need was being served by a really dirty jet fuel plant, and they were interested in, given the reliability concern, if that plant were to retire, what might be some other options. And so in concert with the important clean energy goals of the community and the state, PG&E was interested in determining the viability of alternate solutions that would replace that energy supply with a portfolio of DERs. At Accelerator, the team particularly established a common understanding across a diverse stakeholder group. In this case, the team consisted of utility folks, environmental justice advocates, Environmental Defense Fund, the Port of Oakland, as well as a few other city government folks. Through that process, a number of diverse priorities emerged, and they were able to really map out what those priorities were, who the key stakeholders were, and to make a timeline for what the major activities would be in order to develop those local solutions. This, too, is a project that has really gotten off the ground and has legs. Last September, PG&E made a formal proposal to CAISO in order to approve a preferred resource solution alongside some substation upgrades, and has since issued the Oakland Clean Energy Initiative request for offers, which does exactly that and was seeking solar storage and efficiency solutions in partnership with the CCA that just got off the ground in Alameda County as well. I will also note that, not 2019, I'm getting ahead of myself, but there was a follow-on team from West Oakland this past year that one of the team members who had come to Accelerator in 2017 from an environmental justice group championed his own team this past year that was really focused on what might be some community solar solutions, likely cited on the development at the Port of Oakland, that would really allow the community of West Oakland to share in the benefits of solar, as well as to meet renewable energy desires and goals from that community. I will also note that while both of these projects that I've highlighted were championed by utilities, it is not at all the case that all the teams at Accelerator are championed by utilities. Most of the time, a utility does tend to be on the team, because we believe that in order for these projects to be successful, utilities need to be bought in and involved, but teams can be championed by cities, states, nonprofit service providers, really any number of community groups, any number of stakeholders that are part of the system and able to champion a relevant project. So I just wanted to highlight that, given that PGE and PG&E might suggest a very, very narrow and illiterate only interest in types of projects. Teams that do not have the initials PGE are also invited to apply. I'm going to pass it back to Kara now to speak a little bit about the project application and recruitment.
Great, thank you, Sherry. All right, so on the next slide, great, we have the basic timeline from now until Accelerator on April 30th. So as you can see, we have a recruitment webinar today, which you are all on. December 14th is our deadline for early feedback, and what that means is if you submit your application before December 14th, we will work with you to provide feedback and make necessary suggestions to make your application that much more competitive. The application deadline is January 18th, and then we will be able to select those teams by the middle of February, and we will then send invitations to those teams. In March, all teams will then have to be registered, so at that point you will have to have all of your team members ready to go and signed up. And then we all arrive at Sundance on April 30th, and Accelerator spends 4 days, and so we'll be concluding on May 3rd. The cost. So the participant fee for Accelerator is $1,700 for nonprofits and government entities, and $2,100 for folks that are at for-profit companies or utilities. These fees include transportation to and from the Salt Lake City Airport, all meals, all event activities, and lodging at the beautiful Sundance Resort. There are scholarships available on a limited basis, and those will be available after team selection.
Just one more note about the scholarships. Those scholarships tend to be for folks who have structural barriers to attendance, so regulators who might not otherwise be able to attend, or community-based organizations that do not have funding to be able to attend.
Thank you. Great, and so this is just a few more details of the application. As you can see, this is what's included in the application. These applications really just should be, short and to the point. We really want to understand what the project is, who's involved, why it's important, and what the status is. And as I mentioned, we are happy to work with you on your application, so please follow up Sherry and I after this webinar so we can start those conversations, and a link to the application can be found on this deck as well. Great, well then that concludes our portion of the webinar, and we're happy to stay on for questions. If you have a question, please just type it into the questions section of the webinar control panel. We had one already on, will these slides be available after the presentation? And yes. Those will be distributed to all, as well as a recording of the webinar will be distributed to all participants.
So maybe we'll just pause for a second for any folks to submit questions as they have them. There's a question around does the cost of attendance include accommodations? Yes, it includes 4 nights of lodging. The application is available online, and we welcome applications as soon as you have filled them out. There's also a question around whether you can apply with a team that maybe is not complete, or you have an idea but you may not have all of the right people lined up. I will say that the most successful applications tend to be those that have a pretty strong stakeholder team assembled. That said, RMI is very happy to help think through who those stakeholders might be and to flesh out any remaining stakeholders needed. For example, we have sometimes accepted applications on the premise and the expectation that if there's a particular missing stakeholder, whether that's a regulator or a utility or a missing community group, that stakeholder is included by the time is included and will be in attendance. Just going to pause for a second to be able to read a few more of these questions. One note of clarification, Accelerator is not a traditional sort of tech startup accelerator. There is not a prize or money at the end of the line. The best way to think about Accelerator is, I have this project, there are some key questions that we still need to work out that are not the technical questions. So who are the 5 to 7 people that I would really like to lock in a room for 4 days to be able to work out all of those non-technical questions? So that's the regulatory questions, the business model questions, the stakeholder engagement questions, all those types of things. Our Accelerator website each year is updated with information around the teams that are in attendance in terms of what are those objectives, what did they accomplish at Accelerator, who is on the team. So that is also, if you're interested in learning more about previous teams, those are all available on our website. And we also have a number of blogs that are being rolled out over time that highlight the work of particular Accelerator teams. So there are often, depending on the project, some follow-on communications and publications related to the teams that attend Accelerator. There's a question around, do we have the 2019 Accelerator faculty lined up? We are sending out the initial invitations, particularly to our to some of our eLab advisors who have been involved from year to year, and I think 1 or 2 maybe on this call right now. And we are in the process of finalizing those. I'd be happy to share with anyone who's interested the list of faculty members from previous years in a more complete version than what was in the slides, if that would be useful. A question around how far along projects should be. As we mentioned, they can be at sort of a range of stages. There are some projects that, in fact, have come to Accelerator multiple years in a row. So those are projects that are ongoing and have new developments and new questions that are emerging. And there are projects that are just getting started. That said, successful projects do tend to be pegged to a particular situation or opportunity, that there's something that's happening that makes this the right question to be asking and the right group of people to get together at this particular moment. A question around whether a particular, if you have an idea that you're curious about, but you're not sure whether it's a good idea or who in particular should be involved, do feel free to reach out to both Kara and I, and we'd be happy to chat further. And or put you in touch with previous Accelerator participants or folks who have been involved in eLab in the past if you'd like to hear from others about how Accelerator can be helpful to you. With that, I think we are just about done, and once again, very happy to answer further questions via email or to set up a call going forward. Thank you so much for joining today. We very much look forward to your applications, and as we've now mentioned several times, we are particularly interested in receiving applications before next Friday or application drafts before next Friday. We are eager to get the most robust and best suited applications we can, and so we'd love to be able to work with you to refine problem statements and stakeholder teams in advance of that January final application deadline. Thank you so much, and hope you have a great afternoon. Thanks.